Hello and welcome to Faces of the Main Line. Our guest today is Jeff Erikson. Jeff is a alcohol and drug rehabilitation counselor. I have special interest in his topic as we have produced shows regarding drugs and alcohol rehabilitation. Hello, this is John Ricciuti and welcome to mainlinetv.org. Jeff?
Thank you, John.
Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
A drug and alcohol rehabilitation counselor. I would think that comes one of two ways, the easy way or the hard way.
Mine came the hard way, John.
Tell me your story.
Mine came the hard way. So I am in long-term recovery from alcohol abuse. My drinking started many, many years ago, like all of us do, and many of us do, as a teenager, as a young teenager. Drinking really didn't get to be a problem until my mid-50s. I am now 64 years old. I've been sober for 4 years. I am the father of 3 lovely daughters, all grown, out of the house. I was divorced in my early 50s, and I think that's what really kind of threw me off. Began to drink every night after work. Pretty much drink myself to sleep.
When you say drink every night after work, that's really not uncommon.
No, that's not uncommon at all. In fact, for a long time, I would get home from work and have a drink, but I'd have 1, maybe 2. As things progressed, alcohol is a very, very progressive disease. It can come on very quickly. There's many people that I know in various programs that are in their teens and early 20s that have already realized that they have a problem with drugs or alcohol. Drugs tend to become a problem quicker. Alcohol can be very, very progressive, which it was in my case, and it took a long time. By the time I was in my later 50s, I was drinking pretty much all day long, which is a really, really scary place to be. And I knew I had a problem. And as a strong-willed person, I thought I could fix this problem myself. And I tried, and I couldn't do it. And it scared the hell out of me. Excuse my language. It's actually scared the hell out of me. So after several attempts of quitting, starting, I finally enrolled in a rehab center, an alcohol and drug rehab center, right here in Devon, Recovery Centers of America. I spent 30 days there. It was the best decision I ever made in my life.
You were divorced at the time?
I was divorced at the time, yeah. It's funny, when I got to RCA, Recovery Centers of America, it was probably about 9 o'clock at night. I had been drinking that day. I decided I'd had enough. I drove myself, crazy alcoholic thing to do, but I did it. Drove myself to RCA and checked myself in. When I woke up in the morning, I walked out in the hallway and I saw a 12-step poster in the hallway. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am in the wrong place. I really did not know anything at all about AA. I knew nothing about the 12 steps, but I had a preconceived notion that this was a religious cult and they were going to brainwash me, and I was never going to be the same. Well, the last part was true. I'm never going to be the same as I was. But in my experience, AA is not a religious cult. It's actually quite an interesting program. It taught me not just how to not drink. That's what I thought I was entering for, was to learn how to not drink. What it taught me is how to deal with life on life's terms. So I don't need to drink. I don't want to drink. When I have something that bothers me, I don't need to forget about it anymore. I don't need to hide it. I don't need to have a drink so I forget what's going on. I could face it, and I learned how to face it. So, like I said, that was the beginning of my sobriety. I've been sober for just about 4 years now. I knew at the time that I needed to change a lot of things in my life. I had worked for over 30 years in the corporate world. I was in various sales positions in technology and software, from director to VP. That environment tends to be a drinking environment. It's also a very high-pressured environment, which I think was part of the reason that I would come home from work and drink, just to forget, because I didn't have the skills or the tools to be able to deal with the pressure on my own. So I knew when I got out of rehab I couldn't go back to the corporate world. So I didn't. I retired for a little while. I moved down to Florida for a couple of years. And Florida's not a great place to be if you're trying to not drink. But it was actually a good testing ground for me. There with a lot of retired people. A lot of them sit around all day and drink.
Were you not drinking when you moved to Florida?
Yes, I was not drinking.
No, that isn't a good place.
But it was great because it taught me a lot, and it taught me how to be around people that are drinking and not let it really influence me too much. I came back because my daughters are in this area. And in Florida, I had thought a lot about what it is I wanted to do. I worked some part-time jobs there. But when I came back, I found a program at Villanova University that's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation, counseling and coaching program.
Is that their professional studies
Yes, it
college?
is. Yes, it is. Now, I enrolled in the coaching program. So I am now a certified recovery coach or a certified recovery specialist.
No.
No? Okay.
It's your show.
Thank you. From that point, I decided it's time for me to give back. I'd been in corporate sales all my life, not ever really liking what I was doing, not feeling good about trying to sell something to some big corporation. I decided it was time to give back. So I have started a private practice called Sobri. It's S-O-B-R-I-I. And Sobri is a Greek word that loosely translates to sober living, sober life. So I provide one-on-one coaching to, my main target is professional men and women in the corporate world, because that's my experience. But really, the tools and processes the procedures I follow fit in several different areas. But I provide one-on-one coaching. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapeutic counselor. I'm a coach. I work with counselors. They deal with the mental side of it. I deal with the day-to-day, let's build a plan. Let's see what it is that's causing you. Let's track your drinking or drug use. When do you do it? What were you doing right before that? Is there something that triggered that? Let's work on tools to help you deal with those triggers in different ways. Let's build an actionable plan where we can track your progress. And if that plan's not working, let's change it a little bit. If there are more deeply rooted psychological problems, I have a partner that's a therapeutic psychologist. He will help me. I will recommend that they see him. He will help me. In the same manner, if he's got patients who have co-occurring issues, one psychological, one addiction, he will refer them to me and I'll work on the addiction side. Addiction is really, really hard to define. It's been around for thousands and thousands, since the beginning of time. Addiction is a disease of the body. It's a physical addiction to whatever substance you happen to be using. But it's also a disease of the mind. It plays into what is the quickest way for me to relieve the pain that I'm in right now, whether that's emotional pain, whatever it is. Or what's the quickest way for me to celebrate something that happened good? if you start drinking like I did at the age of 13, your brain starts to realize that I'm getting my dopamine is it enacts your pleasure senses, right? So my brain has been taught over a period of time that alcohol is going to release my dopamine and make me feel good. But there are lots of other things that will release dopamine. But because a person with a substance use disorder has wired their brain in that way, the drug or the alcohol has pretty much rewired your brain. That's the first thing you're going to go to. At that point, it's a psychological addiction. It progressively becomes a physical addiction to the point where if you don't have it, you don't feel normal. So you want it again. And those are the types of things that as a recovery coach, I help people deal with. Okay.
Do you get the urge to drink?
Absolutely.
Every day?
Not every day. No. I'd say for the first year of my sobriety, it was pretty strong. It's people always say one day at a time, which I thought was insane when I started. Now I tell myself that every day. Give me a reprieve just for one day. I won't drink today. But I don't. I can go sit in the bar with you and you can have a drink and I'll be perfectly fine.
Do you, you mentioned earlier that you drank to go to sleep.
Yes.
Do you find that to be common amongst people?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they can't get themselves to sleep because their minds are doing something?
Your mind's racing. It's a way to calm yourself down. But like I said before, there's so many other ways. I use meditation. I use meditation with my clients. I use prayer. To me, prayer and meditation are very similar. You don't have to be a religious person to pray. I am not particularly religious.
I wasn't going to ask you that.
I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah.
I have no particular faith. I'm a spiritual person.
Do people seek you out, or is it kind of mutual? Some come to you and then say, "Hey, I know this guy," and then they contact Jeff. Is that how?
Yes, I get most of my clients come from referrals, either from other therapists in the area or from, like I said, my partner in Washington, D.C.
I will make a confession to you. I worked in the transit. I worked for SEPTA. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't touch alcohol until 5 o'clock mm-hmm. because then I was off duty, although I really wasn't, because I could be called at any time for right. something, a train falling off the tracks, a fatality or whatever. But a habit that I had to break was at 5 o'clock I could mm-hmm. have a drink. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, this is just a habit.
Yeah.
I'm not really, why am I doing this,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. You said it's a slow process.
Yeah.
Is it one that you're not aware of?
You're definitely not aware of it. I mean, in my own case, I was definitely not aware of it. It snuck up on me very quickly. And it was like somebody flicked a switch. I went from being able to do that, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever, have a drink, to wanting a drink as soon as I woke up in the morning.
I would think that's pretty bad.
It's a terrible, terrible place to be. And there's so many people in that position, and you don't want to be when you're there. And you wake up, you tell yourself, I am not going to do this today. This is the worst thing I can possibly do for myself. 2 hours later, you're doing it.
So how do you define alcohol disorder?
So there's so many different ways that folks define addiction, but to me, there's really certain things that I look at and that I ask my clients to look at. Is it affecting certain things in your life? Is it affecting your health, number one? Is it affecting your family, your relationships with your family, your kids, your wife, your husband, your partner? Is it affecting the relationships with your friends? Is it affecting you financially? Are you making decisions that maybe you wouldn't have made if you had a clearer mind?
You mean like FanDuel?
Maybe like FanDuel, absolutely. And is it affecting your career, your work, what you do outside of the house. If you ask yourself truly, honestly, those questions and give yourself an honest answer, and there's a yes to any of those, then you've probably got a problem with drugs or alcohol. So that's one place where I start. Okay, and people in the throes of addiction can be in many, many different phases. I had a very high bottom. You hear about the bottom, right? It was that point where you say, I've had enough. I had a very high bottom. I was never got a DUI, was never arrested, never got in a fight. My financial situation was okay. It wasn't great, but my drinking was certainly affecting my ability to work. Other people have very low bottoms. Something I want people to understand is that somebody with a substance use disorder, you might call them an alcoholic, you might call them a drug addict, whatever. Number one, they don't want to be there. It wasn't a choice. They didn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to do this. Number two, we are not living under a bridge somewhere. We're your neighbor. We're the guy who sits next to you at work. We're the guy who coaches your kid's soccer team. You would never know that we were struggling with the problem because we can hide it very well. So the prevalence of abuse or people struggling with the ability to control their use is much higher than we think. And until that person does something to act out, or you see them visibly stumbling or whatever, you never knew that they had a problem.
Or you smell their breath.
You smell their breath
or
in the
they
morning.
get the vapors from the...
Whatever.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that stigma of, we're the homeless person, we're the person under the bridge, we're the person, you see walking around on the street. That's a very small percentage of people with substance use problems. Most of us, you would never know. We're successful, family man, mother, father, professional, whatever. You'd never know.
Do you think that the alcohol and drug abuse are starting to balance itself out? Usually, people used to think, well, it was just men. Do you think it's kind of like...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's getting closer to 50-50?
I don't know the exact proportions or percentages, but certainly it affects women just as much as it affects men.
I know the answer. I have my own opinion about this, so I'm going to throw you this softball. How do you think society promotes alcohol use? We both probably have an opinion about this.
Turn on the TV.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. Every other commercial is alcohol. And what are those people doing when they're drinking alcohol? They're having a lot of fun. And now you don't see that with marijuana. You don't see that with cocaine. But all those are substances that change your brain, change the way you're thinking. Because, I shouldn't say because, but we promote alcohol use, right? It's a huge moneymaker. There are lots of businesses who make a lot of money selling alcohol.
And it employs a lot of people.
And it employs a lot of people. So
the making of it and sales of it and
of course.
Marketing of it, yeah.
It's a very popular product, obviously. And it's everywhere. You can't get away from it. But what we don't look at are the problems that it causes. That's a secret. We keep that secret. We don't tell anybody. We don't share with somebody because of the stigma involved in it. Hey, I think maybe I drink too much. You don't sit down with your friends necessarily and talk about stuff like that. Most people don't. It's something you keep secret. You may not even talk about that with your family. Probably don't. You probably hide it from everybody because of the stigma involved. And the fact that we promote it and don't provide help for people who have been negatively affected by it is really the wrong way to look at things. We need to really invest in research, study, therapy, people like me, like recovery coaches. There aren't many of us out there. There are not enough, that's for sure. We need insurance companies to cover rehabs. A lot of them do, some of them don't. To cover therapy. So it's starting. There's certainly people are becoming less afraid of talking out about it. Personally, I'm proud to be a recovering alcoholic, and I'll tell people that I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm not going to start a conversation with it, but I want to give people hope that you can get out of that state. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
You mentioned insurance companies and recoveries. Some programs are only like 7 days.
Yeah.
Is that effective?
7 days is a detox period. It's basically what it is. Your drugs and alcohol stay in your system for a particular amount of time, depending on what it is. Alcohol is generally about 72 hours. Detox from alcohol can be deadly. You can die if you stop drinking without medical help. Luckily, I didn't. I tried several times on my own and stayed sober for a few months at a time. But alcohol is about the only substance you can die from during the detox phase. So that 7-day period is really a detox. It's a medically assisted, you're watched, you're kept in a special wing of the recovery center. And you're given certain medications to help you with the pain and the anxiety and everything else. But there's no healing going on there. There's no time to really think beyond how long am I going to be here and when am I going to feel better? When am I going to get out? Even 30 days in a rehab. Recovery is a lifelong process. It's got to be the first thing you think about every day. I get up in the morning and I do certain readings. I meditate. I tell myself that I am in long-term recovery, and I have a higher power. I don't want to get spiritual on people, but which I never had before, and I don't know what it is. I can't explain it, but I know there's something out there, and I ask that higher power to help me keep sober today. And it works. So even 30 days in a rehab is not enough to rehabilitate somebody. It's a great foundation. And you need a good foundation, just like when you're building a house. You need a good foundation or you can't build the rooms above it.
I worked on a project, Kensington in Crisis, about rehabilitation and addiction. And one of the things that I found was that people lapse as much as 7 and 8 times.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was lucky. I went to rehab once and I've been sober since. There were folks that I was in rehab with that had been there 7, 8 times. One guy was there 18 times. It's a really, really baffling disease.
What, alcohol or drugs?
Both.
Yeah.
Addiction in general.
Yeah.
I mean, addiction can be gambling, can be sex, can be alcohol, can be drugs, can be holding your phone and looking at it for 24 hours a day and not recognizing what's going on around you.
They're all forms of addiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
People are becoming more and more addicted. I want to ask you one last thing.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you to come back.
Okay.
Stigma and labels. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about stigma. Labels, there's a very big push around labels because labels can be very stigmatizing. I am a member of AA. It's not the only path to recovery. It just happened to work for me. In my coaching practice, I provide lots of different ways to recover. There's smart recovery, recovery dharma, many other things. Labels, I call myself an alcoholic. Many people wouldn't do that because they find it stigmatizing. which is fine with me. The label alcoholic and drug addict are now substance use disorder. Personally, I find that a little soft, but it's okay. But if it does reduce the stigma, then I'm all for it. Because the stigma is what's keeping us quiet, keeping us continuing to suffer.
I would like to continue this. Do you think you can come back?
Absolutely.
With Jeff Erikson, this is John Ricciuti. Stand by for part 2. Thank you.